Hi, I'm Christopher, and welcome to the Cabin Boy Knits Woolcast. This episode is all about dyeing yarn with white spruce. I love the white spruce tree. It's fantastic. It's got so many great benefits to it. It's got wonderful medicinal properties, and it's great for dyeing. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and let's get some dyeing done. Before I get dyeing with the tree, I want to talk about a couple things. The white spruce is fantastic. It grows all over Canada. It goes all the way from the Yukon Territory all the way over to the East Coast. And in this area in Ontario, it grows to about 85 feet. And when you look at the trunk of it, it can get as big as 2 feet in diameter. If you want to see a really big tree, you can go to the West Coast, and the white spruce grows to about 120 feet and about 4 feet in diameter. So everything seems to grow a lot bigger out on the West Coast. The wonderful thing about the white spruce is it's got so many medicinal qualities to it. And so I want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the dyeing part of it. When you look at this tree and we think about all of the different aspects of it in the springtime, when the buds come up from the tree, you can take the buds and you can chew it, and there's vitamin C in that. And so, it's a good source of vitamin C, and it actually tastes pretty good as well. When you look at the needles, one thing I love doing with the needles is making tea. And you can grab about 2 tablespoons of needles, put it in a mason jar or a hipster mug, and add some hot water to it and let it steep for about 15 minutes. And after that, it's good to go. You just strain it, and then you've got some great tea. If you're a person who loves taking baths, you can also put that in your bath water as well, and it has a calming effect on your body. So it's pretty cool. When you look at the cones that are on the tree, the cones you can chew. So when you look at the green cones just before they turn brown, you can chew those, and they've got great properties in them to help with sore throats. So if you're suffering from the sore throat, or you've got a flu, you can take that and chew on the cone. Or you can take, once they've matured, you can boil the cones and drink that as well. When I was a kid, and I used to go for a walk with my uncle in the forest, we used to walk by white spruce, and he would take the gum off the tree and start chewing it. And I just thought that was the most amazing thing. First of all, I thought he might die. I didn't know much about the gum on the tree. And then he explained to me that just when you see gum on a tree, the gum comes out of the tree, the inside of the tree, to protect a wound. So it's covering a wound. And when you look back at ancient practices with indigenous people, they were using the gum to cover wounds. They would use it to caulk the boats, the birch bark boats, or even the birch bark pails that they had. So I've tried chewing the gum, and you have to there's a fine art to it, definitely, because sometimes it's really chewy and it can get all over your beard or get stuck in your teeth, or it also can be too chalky as well. So there's a fine art to that. You can also use the bark. The bark is great. You go underneath the bark and get the pulp out of the tree, and that can be ground up and used as flour. You can also eat it as well. So if you're stuck in the forest overnight, look for a spruce tree and you can eat the inside of the bark. I think the last thing I wanted to talk about with the spruce tree is the roots. If you dig up the roots, indigenous people used to use the roots to weave baskets. So, you know, there's so much to do, so much to use out of this tree. I actually had this tree as a Christmas tree. It was in my backyard. I was going to move it, and I just didn't get around to it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to use it as a Christmas tree this year, and then I can use all the other parts for dyeing. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the needles and I'm going to use the branches. You can also use the bark as well, but I'm going to save that for another episode. So let's go over to the fire and get this going. What I like to do in the wintertime is use the snow because the rain barrels are all full of ice or they're taking them in for the season. So I try to use as much snow as I can. And when I'm dyeing with snow, you really have to put it through a sifter or make sure that you get all the impurities out of it because it picks up a lot of pollution and other things as well. But I do love dyeing with it. It's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up this large pot with snow, and I'm going to keep my eye on it because the snow will melt, and then I'm going to put in the needles and the stems from the branches from the white spruce. And the great thing about dyeing bark or trees is that you don't have to worry about it as much with respect to the temperature. It can boil, and in fact when it's boiling it's a great thing. And so I'm going to let it boil for probably about 2 hours, and then we'll come and check it. But you know, if I were to do that with plants like other flowers, for example, I could completely destroy the color. It would just turn to an awful brown. So the great thing about the trees is that you don't have to worry about that as much. So what I'm going to do is fill this up with water. I'm going to start snipping off the needles and the branches, put that in, let it simmer for about 2 hours, then I'm going to come back and check on it. I have to remember to save some for my tea as well. And you're probably thinking, how much is enough? I usually fill it to about a third of the pot size, so I will keep snipping until I have enough needles and branches in there to fill the pot to a third, and then the rest of it will be, I'll put another third of water, or maybe just 2/3. So I want to make sure that I've got the level of needles and branches and water right about here. And then again, we'll let that go for 2 hours, and then I'll come back and check on it. That's probably enough. Okay, that looks great. So I'll let that sit for about 2 hours, and I'll come back and check on it. Last night I checked on my pot and looked at it and really wanted to have it stew a little bit longer. It was getting dark, so I decided to put it into a smaller pot and bring it indoors. So that's what I did. I put it into a smaller pot and left all of the, or most of the needles and branches in the pot and put it in, let it sit overnight. And so this morning I woke up, it smells fantastic. I'm really glad I brought it in. The smell of spruce is all through the cabin. It's beautiful. So what I did was I took it, I strained it and put it back into a pot. Got all the needles out. Well, I shouldn't say all. I probably got about 95% of the needles out of the pot. And so I've got it sitting here. So I was looking at it this morning and I figured out what kind of mordant do I want to use. And I really thought to myself, it's probably good to use an iron mordant in this one. So when we talk about iron mordants, this is my iron mordant jar. So I've got it 2/3 water and 1/3 vinegar. And then I put old rusty nails or screws, anything I can find with rust on it in it. You can see this is what I'm using, these old drill bits. This jar has definitely seen better days. So anyway, I've got that in there. It's been sitting, I usually let these things sit for a couple of months before I start using them. And so I'm gonna have to top this up later on today. So remember, when you're adding iron mordant to any dye bath, be very careful because it really takes on, it's very potent. And so what it can do is really change the color of your dye bath, and sometimes not in a good way. So what I like to do is I like to add it a tablespoon at a time, and then I keep checking the color to see if I'm happy with the color. So that's what I've done. I've checked it, and I'm really happy with the color. So I put this in about an hour ago, because once you put the iron mordant in, you want to check it, you want to check the color, make sure that you're happy with the color. So let's check and see what color we have. So that's it. That's the color. It's quite nice. So it'll be interesting to see how the yarn takes to it. When you're adding yarn to a dye bath, remember it has to be wet. You should never add dry yarn to a dye bath, because when the yarn gets wet, it opens up. And so it opens up and it's really ready to take in the color. So I'm going to add a skein of wet yarn. So here it is. This is a soft spun yarn from Briggs & Little. So I'm going to add this into the dye bath. So I have my dye bath going now. I've got the yarn in the dye bath, and I'm going to let it sit for probably, I'm going to check it every 20 minutes. It's probably going to be in there for an hour though. So I've got an hour to kill. So I'm going to make some tea. I'm going to make some white spruce tea. So you get a mason jar and you put 2 tablespoons of white spruce needles in it, and you add water to it, boiling water, and well, just under boiling. And you let it sit, you let it steep for 15 minutes, and you strain it, and it's ready to drink. So I'm going to do that now. So I'll let this steep for about 15 minutes, and then I'll come back and check on it. So I'm going to check on my yarn and see how it's doing. Oh, it's a nice color. It's a really nice color. But I'm going to keep it in for another 40 minutes and just see how much color it can actually pull. My tea's about ready as well. It's been steeping for about 15 minutes. So we'll check on that, see. Smells good. Smells great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something. When you look at the color of this, and you look at the color of this, 2 completely different colors. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, remember when I was boiling this, I used the needles and I used the branches as well. Here I'm only using the needles. The second reason that it has a different color is because there's iron in here. So I'm not going to be drinking this. And it's got just a little bit of iron. This is just water, and it's my well water and needles. So I don't think it's ready yet. It smells great though, it's really nice. Okay, I think my tea's ready now, so I'm going to strain it. Just get a cheesecloth. You can even use a filter or anything else. But I got a cheesecloth nice and handy. There we go. I've got a couple of needles in here. A little bit of product placement as well, but it smells really good. It tastes good. It tastes great. It tastes kind of like it smells, but it's got a little bit of a sweetness to it as well. I would recommend, if you are going to try this, just don't have more than a cup at a time until your body gets used to it, because it has a diuretic effect. So you just want to drink it in small quantities, but it is very tasty. But now let's go check the yarn. Ooh, this is a nice color. I'm going to put on a glove. Put on both though. Okay, I've got my gloves on. I'm ready to go in and look at the yarn and see how it looks. What color do you think it's going to be? Oh, wow, that's beautiful. It's a nice sage green color. It's really nice. I'll show you what it looks like with the yarn that hasn't dyed. Hasn't been dyed. So this was the Briggs & Little yarn that I put in before dyeing, and this is after. Look at that nice color. That's quite nice. What I sometimes do is with white spruce, I'll either leave it like this or I'll use it and over dye with other colors. Because I love the tones. It looks a little bit, there's green in it and there's a little bit of brown. It's absolutely beautiful. So again, I will actually leave this as is, or I will do a couple of over dyeing with other colors. Because it just adds to the richness of the color. So I'm really happy with that. So I just want to go over the steps again. So I took my big pot. I used snow this time rather than water because it's so plentiful right now this time of year. And I just kept filling up my big pot outside. And once I had it full of snow, I added the needles and the branches of the white spruce. And so I let that boil, and you can really let it boil for a while because it's quite hardy. The needles can take the temperature, and the branches can take it as well. Remember, you can't do that for a lot of things. For a lot of flowers, it would just destroy your dye bath. And so I didn't want to leave it in overnight because it was on an open flame. Put the fire out. I switched buckets, put it into a smaller bucket, and I've got it inside now. So I took that inside, let it sit overnight. I took out the spruce needles and the branches, and then I checked the color and I added some iron mordant. And I just added a little bit. I added a teaspoon at a time because you want to be really careful with it because it can really have an impact on the color, on the overall color. So then I let that sit for a couple hours. Then I put in my yarn, and I let the yarn sit for between 40 minutes and an hour. I was checking it every 20 minutes, and I'm really happy with the color. This is quite nice. So there it is. That is dyeing with white spruce. If you have any questions, please fire them off to me. I love your questions. Happy to answer them. And stay tuned for more natural dyeing. Take care. Bye-bye.